No, it's not clickbait. I'm dead ass, man. Sadie Sink is playing Jean Grey in Spider-Man Brand New Day. But I'm fully aware that's weird as hell. That is a weird thing, and people don't believe in it for good reason. It's like, why would the X-Men be in a Spider-Man movie? Totally get it. Nah. But this is what they're doing, and I want to explain in this video 5 different reasons / pieces of evidence that explain that Marvel is actually doing this, and it also explains why they are doing this. Now, before I get into the 5 reasons, let me be crystal freaking clear about this. I did get this confirmed from a very reliable source. However, it's only one source. So technically, I could be wrong about this. Let's give it a 99.9% chance. Let's take it with a grain of salt. But I am confident enough with what I have heard and the other things that are going on, including a lot of the evidence we're going to go over in this video, that I'm willing to come out here and stake my reputation, or at least part of my reputation, on the fact that Sadie Sink will be playing Jean Grey. I don't know how many people will even buy into this right now, but eventually this will come out, and I think people will look back and be like, wow, Josh was right. And the only other thing that I can say about this, because I obviously have to be very careful about what I say, is that it's very clear that Sony and Marvel are doing a lot to hide who Sadie Sink is playing. And there's actually something they're doing to their own employees that actually tipped me off to this thing being real. That's pretty much all that I can say about it. This is very tricky of Marvel. It shows a sophistication as far as hiding big secrets, because Marvel has so convinced other people out there that it's not Jean Grey that reliable people will likely not even believe what I'm about to tell you. But now let me get into the 5 different reasons why putting the X-Men into this movie makes sense and why there is evidence that Marvel is doing it. Number 1, let's talk about Jeff Snyder's older reports. Many people are going to bring this up. I've brought it up before, but the very first casting rumor connected to Sadie Sink came by way of Jeff Snyder. Jeff had filed this under rumor, and this was way back in the day. This was like earlier this year. And Jeff did say that Sadie Sink was being looked at, or rather she was the top choice for Jean Grey in the new X-Men rebooted film. But there's even more to this, because Jeff didn't just talk about Sadie Sink. At that time, he was talking about Julia Butters, who's from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Gray Man, and Jeff had said that she was likely going to be Kitty Pryde or Shadowcat, which lines up with other rumors that we've heard that suggest that Kitty Pryde is going to be a big part of this new X-Men thing. Harris Dickinson was also mentioned by Jeff Snyder as the top choice to be Cyclops in the new rebooted X-Men, and ironically, about a week after Jeff dropped that scoop, Daniel RPK said that there was a Harris Dickinson type being cast for Spider-Man Brand New Day. What that means is that Daniel saw a casting grid that went out to agencies to get somebody that was a Harris Dickinson type. At the time, Jeff was talking about how Marvel was casting for this new X-Men stuff, and scheduling and financial commitments and all sort of other things were going to go into this decision. And he even mentioned that Harris Dickinson was unlikely to be able to sign this thing for Marvel, as he is doing one of the Beatles biopics, or doing 4 of the Beatles biopics. And here's the thing. We also know that Jeff Snyder is the only scooper out there that publicly talked about Robert Downey Jr. being Dr. Doom before Marvel's official announcement. And this is important because Jeff tells the story about how he heard about this. He literally talked to people at Marvel and they lied to him. They told him it wasn't true. And then a week later on Saturday, they confirmed it at San Diego Comic-Con. So Marvel has like changed how they approach journalists and people with sources and scoopers and just accounts that they have access to, because they used to either give no comment or they would tell you the truth and tell you couldn't talk about it. Well, now Marvel is literally lying to people, and lying to people like Jeff Snyder. That's important because we now know that Marvel's lying to people, and that is probably why a lot of people don't believe Sadie Sink is Jean Grey. But it's also important because around this time, Jeff Snyder flies off the handle, gets super pissed, and starts spilling all sorts of tea about Marvel. And I think this X-Men stuff was in that vein. I think this is stuff that Jeff knew had a certain degree of realness to it, and he was willing to talk about it without getting confirmed by Marvel, because the other thing that he heard, probably from the same source, was downplayed by Marvel, and in fact, they lied to him and told him it wasn't real. So the one guy that knew about RDJ Dr. Doom was talking about it, that Marvel then lied to, is the one guy that was talking about Sadie Sink before the trade said she was in Spider-Man Brand New Day. So that's the first reason that people think this is real, right? But why would they do this? Well, that brings me to number 2. This is the second reason why I believe this and why I think Marvel is doing it. It has to do with the Russo Brothers. Now, you really got to walk with me on this. The Russo Brothers are back for Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. But that is not all they are back for. And in fact, Alex Perez just confirmed recently that the Russo Brothers have joined back into Parliament, which is sort of top secret story group over at Marvel. These are the people that actually decide how the MCU is going to go story-wise. But on top of that, the Russo Brothers are also heavily involved in the planning of the Mutant Saga. That was also broke by Alex Perez. Jeff Snyder confirmed this, and in fact, there's some indication that the Russos have been brought on to be producers for even the Marvel movies you watched this year. I'm talking about Fantastic Four, Captain America, Brave New World, and the Thunderbolts film. At the very least, the Russos were plugged in as members of Parliament and massive collaborators for Marvel overall. And so it's not hard to believe that they would be involved in the casting decisions for the X-Men saga, at least giving some input. But you also have to look back to the history of how the Russo brothers are the shepherds of a lot of coming characters in the Infinity Saga. Spider-Man, who went on to have his own trilogy and do a lot of stuff in the MCU, was first introduced in a Russo brothers movie. Black Panther, who went on to have a movie, and then of course Chadwick tragically passed, and then it moved to Shuri. And had that not happened, T'Challa would have had a whole trilogy and probably done a lot more in the MCU. But that character, to the point I'm trying to make, was first introduced in a Russo Brothers movie. It's not uncommon for Marvel to introduce coming characters in big ensemble cast films to see how they would function with the other Marvel characters, to get people excited about their appearance, to then have the audience go follow them in their own movies. And so we've got Jeff Snyder talking about Sadie Sink, Harris Dickinson, talking about casting for the X-Men, which, by the way, he has continued to say they are casting the X-Men, and a lot of other scoopers and people are saying that's not true. But Jeff continues to say, I know they're casting the X-Men. And by the way, I believe him on that. Then we got the Russo brothers coming in, being plugged in as members of Parliament, and the precedence of how they had been used by the studio to introduce new characters and new franchises in their ensemble films in the Infinity Saga. We also know that they're sticking around in Parliament for the coming Mutant Saga. And that takes us to comments by Kevin Feige. Now, there's two sets of comments I want to discuss. I want to discuss comments from all the way back in 2019 when Kevin Feige was directly asked about the X-Men. Kevin basically gives an answer that they have a 5-year plan and the X-Men are coming, but they have a lot of stuff they want to accomplish first. But then years and years later, after Deadpool and Wolverine finally starts bringing official X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Kevin says this. When asked about the coming X-Men, he said, it has already started. Certainly, Deadpool and Wolverine was the biggest yet, Feige said. I think you'll see that continue into our next few movies and some X-Men players that you might recognize. And then right after that, the whole story of Secret Wars really leads us into a new age of mutants and of the X-Men. And again, one of these dreams come true, that we finally have the X-Men back at Marvel Studios. So there's two important things to talk about in the new comments, and I then want to talk about the 2019 comics and how this all ties together. So Kevin is talking about how the X-Men, the coming X-Men, are actually going to be in Marvel movies that are coming out. He says the next few movies and some X-Men players that you might recognize. And yet, after making that comment, there's really no X-Men in any of the Marvel movies that came out this year. Fantastic Four didn't have any X-Men. The Thunderbolts movie didn't have any X-Men. Captain America Brave New World might have had a mutant or two or some connections. There's some vague connections to the Weapon X program via adamantium and things of that nature, but there's no real mutants in there, at least not any big time ones. Like he says, some X-Men players that you might recognize. I didn't recognize shit from Captain America Brave New World. The point I'm making is, around this time when Kevin was making these comments, Bob Iger's also out there talking to investors about how Marvel is going to be focusing more on their bigger franchises. And so I believe that what Kevin was talking about here was a plan that they might have had as something to introduce in maybe the Fantastic Four, maybe even the Thunderbolts, but was eventually moved out. But it is a plan that will remain for Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now, going back to the 2019 comments, man, it's so wild, because even back then, Kevin had a plan for X-Men and he wanted to do something with the X-Men, but he wasn't going to do it for 5 years. And yet we started to see some of this stuff introduced via the 616 characters, like Kamala Khan becoming a mutant, Namor is name dropped as a mutant, but there's really not a lot of focus on it, at least in 616. And yet we know that they had been planning X-Men stuff, not only for the Fox X-Men, X-Men were going to make a big comeback in Doomsday, and maybe a few of them make it to Secret Wars as well. But he was planning his own version of the X-Men, which was going to connect to Secret Wars. And so this big plan is coming to fruition. And I think a big missing piece of this plan is Spider-Man Brand New Day. It's also possible that some of the characters that Fox had contracts with were not able to actually be recreated in that 5-year window. I've talked about this before in videos and streams, and we can't find a clear-cut answer on this, but there's some indication that there was like a non-compete clause with some of the last movies that were released by Fox for their X-Men, and so the characters that were in those movies were unable to be recreated by Disney for a certain interim, which felt like 5 years. And if that's true, it would explain why Kevin started to kind of introduce the concept of the mutants via 616, and then about 5 years after the deal closes in 2018, boom, you get Deadpool and Wolverine, and you're actually able to bring in all of those mutants. That brings us to number 4, right? We got the old scoop from Jeff Snyder. We got the fact that the Russo brothers are coming back. They're members of Parliament, and there's precedence for them introducing new franchise characters in their ensemble films. And then we've got multiple comments from Kevin Feige that make it seem like there was always an X-Men plan. It might have been 5 years away, but there were a lot of details that they were working on. And Kevin has recently said that you're going to see X-Men characters you might recognize in their next few films, and yet they're not in any of the 2025 movies. And that takes us to the scoops and the current rumors around Sadie Sink's character for Spider-Man Brand New Day. Right now, the house money is on this character of Shathra, who is this connected character to the Web of Life and Destiny, something like a dark side version of Madam Web. But I don't think that shit matters at all, because I'm frankly convinced that that's all misdirection. One of the first things I was told from a very reliable source was that Sadie Sink's character was the multiverse in some way. She was like a living embodiment of the multiverse. And when I first heard that, I thought maybe Captain Universe, the Omniforce, the Uniforce, something like that. But one of my very next thoughts was of the Phoenix. Because of Jeff's original scoop, I was always kind of connecting Sadie to the Phoenix. And I thought to myself, okay, well, the White Hot Room and whatever the Phoenix is, which is connected to the White Hot Room and sort of the life force and the death force of the entire universe, maybe multiverse. Yeah, that's technically a freaking multiversal connection, and that could absolutely be Jean Grey. On top of that, the Shathara scoops don't really make sense, because we know there's going to be a scene where the main villain, which we think is Sadie, is going to mind control a bunch of the prison guards in a prison because she wants to get Scorpion out of prison. But the thing is, Shathra doesn't really control people like that. She controls people by shape-shifting. She controls people with some of like these venom stinger like things that she can do, but those are basically for drones that she makes. Like, Shathra doesn't actually mind control people. She doesn't like actually have telepathy in that way. She does have a connection to the life and destiny and that sort of force of nature, and she can open portals and teleport around and do some crazy stuff, but she can't mind control people. That's not her powers. And we've been hearing that this character can shapeshift, and you're like, okay, well, Jean Grey's not a shapeshifter, but she absolutely is. Jean can make herself appear any way she wants to any character that is looking at her. And then there's the comments by Sadie Sink, which came out just a couple of weeks ago, where she's talking about how she hopes all the speculation is over, and she even dropped this line about how hair color can change, which is so weird because we have set photos of her with her actual hair color on the set. So that's obviously a lie, and I think it's misdirection. She's doing her best werewolf. She's doing her best Andrew Garfield, and it's terrible because I can see right through it. So given the rumors of this villain being something like a shapeshifter, manipulating other characters, and the fact that the rumors are this character is connected to the multiverse in some way, it really all rings true to Jean Grey. Just another reason that all of this stuff lines up. And that takes us to number 5. So we got the old rumors from Jeff Snyder. We got comments from Kevin Feige. We got the Russo brothers coming back and being plugged into the story group. And we have all the current leaks and rumors about this character. Now, let me explain the rumors about Peter Parker and Doomsday. Now, this is super important to understand because it's very likely Tom Holland's Peter Parker is not in Avengers Doomsday, which seems wild, but one of the explanations is that Doomsday and Spider-Man Brand New Day are actually happening either simultaneously or so close to each other that they're basically happening at the same time. Now, we don't even know for sure if that's real, but it seems like Tobey Maguire is going to be the main Spider-Man for Avengers Doomsday, and even if Tom Holland is in it, it, it's probably just at the very end of the film. There's a lot of evidence that Tom Holland's gonna have a huge role in Secret Wars, and I think Andrew Garfield's gonna be back in Secret Wars, and Tobey's gonna be in Secret Wars. But the reason it's so weird that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is not in Doomsday is because when it was known as the Kang Dynasty, when Avengers 5 was the Kang Dynasty, Tom Holland was literally going to be the lead of that movie. And at that time, Destin Daniel Cretton was going to be the director of the Kang Dynasty. Now there's no Kang Dynasty. Destin is directing Spider-Man Brand New Day, and Tom Holland's Spider-Man might not even be in Doomsday. Well, doesn't that seem like they took whatever the plot was or whatever the main thing they were going to do with Tom Holland and removed it from Doomsday and put it in to Spider-Man Brand New Day? On top of that, we've heard some Mephisto stuff might be going on, the Brand New Day connection to Mephisto. That could absolutely be real. And in the Avengers Forever comic book run, which Alex Perez has indicated will be adapted for the Secret Wars and Doomsday story, in that run, Mephisto and a version of the Dark Phoenix are both on the same team of villains that work for a variant of Doctor Doom. And remember that some of the first documentation that went out for Spider-Man Brand New Day indicated that Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom will be in that film. Now, the next part here is speculation, but I believe what they're trying to do with Peter is going to connect him to Doctor Doom in a really interesting way. Either they're both prime versions of their character from the original version of the Sacred Timeline, or Peter Parker, our Tom Holland Peter Parker, has some kind of connection to Doctor Doom, maybe via his connection to Tony Stark on the Sacred Timeline. There's something going on which would make Peter a threat to Doctor Doom. Like maybe Peter is the only character that has a spider sense that would be able to tell that Doom was lying to everybody, which would totally ruin Doom's plans because we hear he's going to be doing a lot of machinations, a lot of manipulation, and lying to people in Avengers Doomsday. So however you slice it, it really does seem like Tom Holland, Spider-Man, super important to resolving the Doctor Doom RDJ thing, to resolving Secret Wars, and he was going to be a huge part of Kang Dynasty. I truly believe that plot has been moved to Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now, here's the thing. I think it's still fair if people are like, dude, that's too crazy. X-Men in a Spider-Man movie? What? But the thing is, they're either X-Men that are already being manipulated by Doctor Doom, like maybe they're the X-Men from the Prime Universe that are being manipulated by Doctor Doom, or it's even possible that Sadie Sink doesn't even know that she is Jean Grey. Because one of the big concepts that's coming out in Doomsday is going to be that there are characters currently in the universe that are fake. They are not actually who we think they are. And the main one is Tony Stark. So apparently, according to the rumors, our Tony Stark was always a Victor Von Doom born variant who was adopted by the Starks and raised as a Stark and thought himself to be Tony Stark. I know that sounds crazy, but there's a lot of evidence mounting that that is what it is. And at the very least, it seems like there was a version of the universe before He Who Remains remade it that was more pure, that was more real. For a long time, we've been wondering, how are they going to bring in the 616 mutants? How could people that are going to end up as the X-Men in the reset or rebooted MCU be showing up now as villains? And the answer is Doctor Doom. Like, it's very simple. So these are either the prime variants of the X-Men characters, or these are variants out there in the multiverse, maybe spinning off from the Prime universe, and Doom has grabbed them up and is using them to further his plans in Spider-Man Brand New Day and in Avengers Doomsday. I also think this does a great thing as far as setting up certain 616 characters to have conflict with the X-Men before the X-Men even arrive. So let's just say that Peter Parker retains these memories of Avengers Doomsday, maybe not the Secret Wars ones, but at least the Doomsday ones and the Spider-Man Brand New Day ones. Then when Peter actually sees Sadie Sink as Jean Grey, he's going to remember the evil version of her. And guess what? She's a telepath. So she's going to see that version in his mind. That's kind of a crazy mind fuck, but a pretty fun way to set up conflict between Avengers characters and X-Men characters. So I guess just file it under rumor for now, but I'm willing to come out here and say it, man. I feel very strongly that Sadie Sink is playing Jean Grey, and there's some shenanigans going on with the X-Men in Spider-Man Brand New Day. It's crazy. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.